is Brannon House Live. Whether the issue is law, science, economics, history, family, social issues, education, religion, government, or national security, Brannon brings the issues of the day into clear focus through the lens of a Judeo-Christian worldview. And now, here is your host, Brannon House.
And welcome to the broadcast. Glad you are with us on this December 19, 2025. Going to have on Professor Economist Dan Eastman to talk about where we're going with the economy, inflation. That's what everybody's talking about. Affordability. Things are getting so expensive. Just a used automobile, a used pickup truck versus new, right? But the president is trying to convince Americans that there's affordability, that everything's good. There's no inflation problem, but there is. So we're going to deal with that. Is that likely to end in 2026, or is it likely to go up, particularly with the government buying back what is reported to be $9 trillion of its own debt? Where is this going? And where does he see gold and silver going, which, of course, is a barometer of many things, of course, including inflation, because it takes more dollars to buy more gold. Same 1 ounce gold coin, but it takes a lot more dollars to buy it. That is obviously one sign of inflation, not just supply and demand. And yet we'll also talk about the great taking. There's a new video clip out tonight. And what about all the different instruments that you own, the financial instruments you own? What happens if there's problems with some of these institutions? What happens with those instruments? That's very interesting. We'll play a clip and get the attorney and economist and professor to answer that question. By the way, we do have breaking news. Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, put out a tweet stating earlier today, U.S. forces commenced Operation Hawkeye Strike in Syria to eliminate ISIS fighters, infrastructure, and weapons sites in direct response to the attack on U.S. forces that occurred on December 13th in Palmyra, Syria. This is not the beginning of a war. It is a declaration of vengeance. The United States of America under President Trump. His leadership will never hesitate and never relent to defend our people. And we said directly following the savage attack, if you target Americans anywhere in the world, you will spend the rest of your brief, anxious life knowing the United States will hunt you, find you, and ruthlessly kill you. Today, we hunted and we killed our enemies, lots of them, and we will continue, end quote. Well, there you go. We'll keep you posted on that issue as well as it unfolds this evening. All right. If you appreciate all we're doing, thank you again for being here, and thank you for your end-of-year support. Worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. A lot of pictures, by the way, were just released today related to Epstein. I don't know if I want to spend a bunch of time reading the tweets and talking about them other than to say it's out there. I acknowledge it. But there you go. It's all just too sordid in some ways for me to want to deal with. I'm too tired. It's been a long week. But as I was saying, if you appreciate what we're doing, worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. You'll also find our mailing address there and our phone number. You can make a contribution by credit card, PayPal, so much more. Worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. And, of course, worldviewtube.com/sponsors. Let's go there real quick. Worldviewtube.com/sponsors. They're all there. You know them. I won't take the time tonight to go through it all. You know our sponsors. Thank you for using the products. The one I will mention, of course, the most is the Vault, because it is a great way for you to get a gift for someone right now, very inexpensively. And you can do it online. You don't have to fight a shopping mall or anywhere. But if you do buy this as a gift for someone, please put right there, is this a gift? Click that. All right. Worldviewtube.com/vault. All right, let's get started. Joining me now is the Professor Dan Eastman. He's on every day, 11 a.m. Central, Monday through Friday, right here at Worldview Tube. 11:30 Central, 11:30 Central, each and every day, Monday through Friday. And the professor, the economist, the attorney, Dan Eastman. Merry Christmas. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Merry Christmas, Brandon. Great to see you. It's always wonderful to be on your show. Thank you.
You too, my friend. So silver has now gone over $67 today. 67 bucks. Gold is at about 4,338 or so, but over $67. I want to play a quick clip and have you respond to all this. This is Ray Dalio. Listen to what he's warning about. Here we go.
I think that right now we are at a decision-making point and very close to a recession. And I'm worried about something worse than a recession if this isn't handled well. A recession is 2 negative quarters of GDP, and whether it goes slightly there, we always have those things. We have something that's much more profound. We have a breaking down of the monetary order. We are going to change the monetary order because we cannot spend the amounts of money, so we have that problem. And when we talk about the dollar and we talk about tariffs, we have that. We are having profound changes in our domestic order, how ruling is existing, and we're having profound changes in the world order. Such times are very much like the 1930s. I've studied history, and this repeats over and over again. So if you take tariffs, if you take debt, if you take the rising power challenging the existing power, if you take those factors and look at the factors, those changes in the orders, the systems, are very, very disruptive. How that's handled could produce something that is much worse than a recession.
Something much worse than a recession. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Professor?
Well, I think Ray Dalio is a very intelligent economist and businessman and investor. He certainly has done extremely well. And I taught economic history for 9 years at college, and I often referred to his thinking, his public comments. So I have a lot of great respect for Ray and his thinking. And what he's very, very much correct in that we are in uncharted waters. And these are very interesting times. If you look at the $38 trillion in federal debt that the federal government has accumulated, I'll say since 1945, since the modern era began, and you look at the annual deficit, $2.5 trillion annual deficit last year, which the fiscal year ended September 30th, and then the government shut down, even though it really didn't shut down. And the numbers are a little bit of a lag. But the point is the federal government, and I'm talking about Congress specifically, the House of Representatives holds the purse strings of the government and simply cannot balance a budget. They cannot manage money. And we have racked up massive federal debt. It's to the point where when we take our $5 trillion in tax revenues, we have 165 million Americans who pay taxes, corporate and individual. You take the $5 trillion that we raise in taxes, and then you spend 7.5, and you add the deficit to the debt. What's happening is that they are deteriorating, they're crumbling the value of the American dollar. And traditionally, we've looked at that as inflation, but what Ray's talking about is something different. He's talking about a monetary crisis where it suddenly becomes not wise to hold American dollars. And I think that's why you're looking at silver at $67 an ounce, which is a stunning amount of money for silver. And gold at $43.80 today, whatever, for over $4,300. What it's telling us on a global basis is the United States government is broke. It's running deficits over and over and over again. The government is shutting down. They kicked the can to January 30th. Now we'll be looking at the next government shutdown, where the government really doesn't shut down, but they penalize 42 million Americans on food stamps, and the poor air traffic controllers are always caught in the middle. But what Ray is saying is we're going, it's not so much a recession when we think about a contraction of the GDP for 2 quarters, which would signal a recession. What we're looking at is a collapse in the confidence of the American dollar, and more frightening, a collapse in confidence in the American Congress to govern the United States of America. And this is a really big problem. It's a political problem that's manifesting itself on Wall Street. If you listen to my program, and you're right, it's 11:30 to 12 Central, Monday through Friday. It's the Eastman Financial Report right here on this network. And I talk about this every single day, that if you look at history, historically, you go back to the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire and, the British Empire, the sun never set on the British Empire. Well, today, that empire is gone as well. And the American Empire started in 1945 after World War II, Bretton Woods, where we set the value of the world currencies against the dollar up in New Hampshire, where I went to law school. And all of that is coming unhedged. And that's why you're seeing global...
reduce drug...
I'm sorry?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you see, that's why you see banks, central banks around the globe accumulating more and more and more gold. That's what's really driving the price of gold. The central banks are looking at an alternative to the American dollar because there is so much debt out in the marketplace. It's like when American dollars become like sand, grains of sand on the beach, they're not worth a lot. And that's what Ray's talking about. And that's not, he's not the only one. I mean, there are many economic thinkers these days that are extremely concerned about the Biden administration racking up $11 trillion in debt. And now we're at 38 trillion. And then they raised the debt ceiling. We've got clearance to about $42 trillion. At some point, the money stops meaning anything. And this is really starting to impact the average American citizen. If you're in the top tier, these are very heady days. You're making millions and millions of dollars. I think we were talking about this earlier. We send some nobody off to Congress. You have 435 representatives that represent 330 million Americans. Off they go to Washington, and in 4 years, they come out of there with, what, $25 million in net worth? I mean, if that isn't a pay-to-play system or some sort of a go to Washington, write books that nobody reads, give speeches that nobody listens to, and here's $25 million or 19 million. Let's say you're, AOC, whatever. This is a real sign that the system is coming apart. This is a failed state signal in an economy. You take a look at what's happening in Minnesota, and it's just absolutely shocking that people who live in Minnesota could have scammed the federal government through a state government for $8 billion in fraudulent government money, fraudulent spending. It's stunning. When you start to see things like that, and you look at the DOGE thing that came in and looked at all the agencies and found billions and billions of dollars being funneled into NGOs worldwide to do the very stuff that would be illegal for the federal government to do, this is a failed state. They live in a world of their own, and the American people are the tax-paying, effectively they're serfs, or they're like back in the olden days when we were colonies of the British Empire. That was one of the big triggers. Why did we separate from the British Empire? It was the biggest government on earth since the Roman Empire. We realized that they were taking all the wealth out to London, and we were left with the scraps. So there was a revolution. We threw them out. Well, it's the same sort of thing when we look at Washington today. You have the city of Washington, D.C., and then you have 50 states. But Washington's not a state. It's nothing. It's this place. It's like London. The city of London's not part of, big Greater London or Great Britain. It's its own place. Vatican, same thing. These are all these little intricate cities that have gross and amazing power on a global basis. And what Ray is saying is we're getting to that point. And Ray's not alone. You have Peter Schiff and others. We've been raising these red flags for a very long time, saying we cannot live in a society with a fixed population of 330 million people and 165 million of them are paying taxes. The $5 trillion that's raised, almost 25% of those dollars goes to pay interest on the debt, the 38 trillion in debt that we spent that money years ago. It's not sustainable. It's just simply not. And last year on my show, we were talking about this in the Biden administration. You had the chair of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, saying, hey, this isn't sustainable. Warren Buffett said, this isn't sustainable. The CEO of Chase Bank said, this isn't sustainable. Even Janet Yellen was saying, this isn't sustainable. But yet, here we go. We send these people back to Washington, and what do we see? Massive, massive deficit spending, and there's no end in sight. So then we look at the tariffs, and at least the tariffs are bringing a little bit of money in, but the tariffs aren't closing that gap. It's nice to have extra money, but they're not closing the gap. The only thing that closes the gap is to cut spending. And I'm talking about major cuts in spending. And how do you do that when you've gilded the spending with Social Security and Medicaid for the elderly and this Medicare for the poor? Well, that's, it's billions of dollars scammed out of the system. This is a failed state. And I think more and more people on Wall Street, more and more investors are beginning to realize that, and also other countries. You look at China with 1.6 billion people and India with 1.61 billion people. That's 3 billion people over there. And we're 330 million, and we're broke. I mean, people are griping about, the cost of a pickup truck. The average price of an American car is over $50,000. If you want to buy a new pickup truck, it's way north of that. It can be $100,000. If you look at the median price of housing existing and new in the United States, it's $436,000 is the average price of a house. And that takes $118,000 in household income to make the mortgage. Well, the average income is $65,000. So the vast majority of Americans are being left behind. And the orchestra has been playing some beautiful music in Washington and New York, but the people on the street, we're not dancing to the symphony here. We're not dancing at all, and it's a real problem.
So where do you think we're headed if silver is at $67 tonight? And gold's at over 4,330 something. Yeah. Where do you think we're headed, if you had to guess?
Well, the price of gold. I mean, when I started broadcasting in March of 2023, that's when we started the Eastman Financial Report. Gold was $1,805, and the big question was, can it go to 2,000? Can we get there? Can you really see 2,000? And all the wags are saying, of course not. That's ridiculous. The world will come to an end. Well, as you point out, today it's $4,300 for the same ounce. The coin didn't get bigger. It's the same 1 ounce coin. Check your sock drawers. Coins are the same size, same weight. It just takes so many more dollars to buy. But if you study economic history and you look at financial collapse, and it's not a pretty thing. I mean, this is not the kind of thing where everybody's hoping that there's that's not how you want to change society. But when it comes fast. And that's, if you look back to the hyperinflation in Germany in the 1920s, it really accelerated. It's like Hemingway said, how'd you go broke? He said, well, it started out slow and then it went fast. That's exactly what happens. When a panic sets in, and people are getting out of dollars and into other tangibles, you can see gold at $10,000. You can see gold at $25,000. You can see housing. I mean, there are so many places in the United States where modest income and average income people simply cannot afford to buy a home. And now they're being squeezed out on apartment rents. They can't even afford the apartment rents. What are you going to do with these people? They're going to live in a tent? This is a real problem. So when you say, where does it go? You'd like to see it go back. You'd like to see gold come back to $2,000 an ounce. That's what you'd like to see. But my fear is it's going to 5 and then it's going to 10.
Wow.
And that curve begins to accelerate as people panic. And another interesting thing with this market, we're 330 million Americans. You got 3 billion people offshore in very advanced societies. We're becoming a small country. We think of ourselves, the United States are the greatest power on earth. Well, so was England back in the day. Well, they're not really impressive at all anymore. And that's what happens. When you spend yourself broke, you lose your clout and you lose your power. I mean, if that's how we ended up with Alaska, when you stop and think about it, Alaska became a state in 1959, believe it or not. And how did we end up with Alaska? Because the Tsar of Russia spent so much money and was so in debt fighting Napoleon and spending all this money on military, they went broke. And what do? They sold Alaska to the United States, thinking it was a backwater country, and they used the money to prop up the Russian treasury. That's how we ended up with Alaska. Well, I postulate, what if we have to sell it back? Or what if the Chinese buy it? $38 trillion, sell them Alaska. This stuff has happened globally since creation. If you study economic history, borders move and times change and empires come and empires go. But our Congress needs to stop and really think about, if you're going to tax $5 trillion, then that's all the money you have to spend. And we do that at our local level, that our towns or cities or villages, balanced budget. Our counties, balanced budget. Even the states, according to the U.S. Constitution, balanced budget. Well, California and New York have struggled with that. But the point is balanced budget. You go to Washington, D.C., there's no mechanism that stops them from ever spending money. There's no discipline.
Well, in fact,
there's no legal mechanism.
In fact, speaking to that, we're now, I played this clip yesterday, but it bears playing again for reminding everyone and your response. Our own government now is going to be purchasing our own debt. $9 trillion. Watch this.
The Federal Reserve just announced it's unleashing the money printers to finance a $9 trillion wall of federal debt coming due this year. As in, markets won't buy it, so the Fed will with counterfeit money. This is where the Fed types zeros on Excel sheets in the basement, declares their dollars like any good counterfeiter, then uses those fake dollars to buy government debt called quantitative easing, or QE. Jerome Powell said the Fed's kicking off with $40 billion a month, which is $500 billion per year, lovingly printed straight out of your wallet. Now, this is concerning because the last time the Fed did this, in the 1940s to finance World War II, it sent inflation into the double digits. At one point in 1947, annual inflation was 20%. In fact, it's how Weimar Germany got to hyperinflation and wheelbarrows of money, because once the central bank starts printing the deficit with inflation, it's very tempting to make that deficit very big. After all, there's a lot of special interests to feed in Washington, $1 trillion here, $1 trillion there. Soon it is real money. What's even more concerning is that in the 1940s, it was just about financing government debt. Today, the Fed needs to pump hundreds of billions just to sustain a financial sector that has ballooned to nearly 5 times GDP. The Fed literally admitted this, with Jerome Powell claiming that this is not real QE, which everybody knows is inflationary. This, in fact, is necessary to maintain, quote, ample reserves so the Fed can maintain control of interest rates. In other words, the financial system breaks unless the Fed keeps a full plate of cocaine or inflation by the bar.
All right. So how and why would President Trump run around continuing to hammer this idea, including in his really odd speech the other night where he was speaking monotone at 100 miles an hour and telling everybody how great the economy is? I mean, it's ridiculous. A lot of people know this is not a great economy. Like you just said, a used pickup truck's $50,000. People are having a hard time. Why do you think he's insistent on how the economy is great, prices are down, when you know you're going to have inflation? The reaction of gold and silver tells you we have an inflationary. The price of goods and services tells you we have an inflationary problem. And it's only going to continue because the Fed only has one choice: keep printing or making the credit available, or the whole system collapses. So why is President Trump arguing with himself? Why is he arguing low inflation when anyone can walk in the room and say, you can argue that all day, but we are not going to see the end of the increase of inflation unless you think the Feds are going to quit expanding the money supply in digits, unless you think that all of a sudden we're going to get our spending under control. There's going to be inflation. So why are you setting yourself up for failure by running around saying there's no inflation? Why is he doing that?
Well, I think, the presidency is a very powerful office, obviously. And of course, people look to the president for leadership. And of course, if the president comes out and says the sky is falling, everybody run, that would be a bad message. And I think there is room for hope and optimism. But let's talk about what we're seeing with this Federal Reserve and this quantitative easing situation. When the Federal Reserve has a monetary policy that was given to it by Congress, a dual mandate. Number one, keep inflation below 2%. Well, we have 3% inflation. And number two, keep the unemployment rate lower than 5%. We want full employment and low inflation. And the way they do that is they make the interest rates in the economy go up or down and keep these bonds in the federal treasury bonds in the right lane. And we look at the 10-year treasury bond, which is what sets the mortgage market. And that's trading at about 4.5%, 4.2%. It trades up and down all day long. And of course, mortgages are about 2 points above that. So mortgages are still in the 6%. What the Fed has to do, and this is the problem where the Fed is boxed in using tools from 1913 to deal with $38 trillion in debt and the government fiscal policy spending us broke. The Fed has to step in and buy and sell bonds every day. And this is what they do at their open market desk in downtown Manhattan at the Federal Reserve Bank in Manhattan. They have a trading desk, and it's a very sophisticated operation. They don't want to rile the markets, but they're buying and selling bonds in every tranche, the 10s, the 20s, the 30s, all day long to keep those bonds in the interest rate band that they want. And what you can see if you look at the Fed balance sheet, you can do that by going to the Federal Reserve website, is more and more and more money. They print money out of thin air. They go into the market and they're buying these bonds out of the market and parking them on their balance sheet, which effectively removes them from the supply. It parks them in a neverland. And they continue to have to grow QE. Quantitative easing means new printed money in to buy bonds from people, park them on the balance sheet, and that keeps the 10-year in a band. And that's why they say we're going to lower the interest rates. But what's happened, if you look at the balance sheet, they can't quantitative tighten and sell them back in and take money out of the out of the economy, because the economy will collapse. So what we're seeing is the Federal Reserve is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as it buys more and more bonds to reduce the supply, to keep the price up, which when a price goes up, an interest rate goes down, and vice versa. They have to keep buying and pulling out to keep the supply and demand balanced at that interest rate price point. So they're caught. And that's why we say the Fed should be an independent body. They can't. They can't break away, because if the Fed did nothing and said, we're not buying any more bonds, good luck. Treasury Secretary Bessent, you out and sell the bonds, and he has to. It's the law. Budget passes Congress, the continuing resolution, president signs it into law, and they're obligated to spend the money. If the Fed didn't do that, interest rates would go through the roof, because there'd be an oversupply of bonds, and the supply is up, the demand is down, interest rates go up, and we'd be looking at 18% interest to finance the debt. That's why the Federal Treasury is stepping in. We were talking about that a couple of weeks ago, where the Federal Treasury itself, not the Federal Reserve, but the Treasury steps in, and they're buying higher yield bonds and replacing them with shorter term, lower yield notes and bills. What they're doing is reshuffling their portfolio, because the debt service on the federal debt, the $38 trillion in debt, is $1.2 trillion, which is 25% of our tax base. So if they don't lower the interest costs by buying and substituting higher debt for lower cost debt, there's not enough money in the system. And the fallback is the Federal Reserve that can always create money out of thin air, go in, buy bonds, and park them safely on that balance sheet. Keep in mind, that Federal Reserve balance sheet has never been audited. That's a big thing with the conspiracy theorists. But the reality is, you can go to their website, they show you how many bonds they've got. And it's between $6 and $8 trillion. And it's been there since 2007, when quantitative easing started, and certainly since COVID. This is an unsolvable problem until Congress balances the $5 trillion in taxes with the spending. And if they're going to do $2 trillion in deficit spending, you can't fix it. I talked to my local congressman. I love the guy, but
doesn't that mean inflation then has no direction but up? Right?
It does, but Ray's point is it's beyond inflation.
Okay, but then why is Donald Trump continuing to say that? Why is he setting himself up for failure by continuing to hammer this no inflation, everything's great, best economy ever? I mean, apparently he doesn't listen to advisors, but wouldn't his advisors be saying, stop saying that? You're denying people's pain. What you need to be doing is a Bill Clinton. Bite your lower lip and say, I feel your pain. I'm trying to fix it.
Well, he is, to be fair. And I think Secretary Bessent came out the other day, and this is fascinating. He made the comment that Americans are going to be getting $1,000 to $2,000 checks from the government.
Which is inflationary.
What he's talking about is people have been they take money out of your paycheck every 2 weeks, the withholding tax. And when you file your income tax return, you get a refund. Well, that isn't government money. It's your money the government's been using for a year without paying you interest, and you're getting more of your money back. But that was money that was created at the time it was pulled out. It's not new money. It's just that you're getting a bigger slice of what you paid in back. But then the $5 trillion in tax revenue is going down. And then they're still spending 7.5 in spending. So the deficit's getting bigger. So the pile of debt's getting bigger. So it's a real problem. And from a political perspective, you want, everybody, it's got to be, sunshine and daisies, but because you don't want everybody going to the polls next November and throwing the bums out. You want to create this illusion that, that good times are here again. And that's what you do from a political perspective. But what Ray's pointing out, and others, is that when you end up in a currency crisis or a monetary crisis, we look at inflation, But if you ever think about a deflationary environment, that's what the Great Depression was. Prices kept declining because nobody had any money. It was an old joke. I said, the guy says, when I was a kid, everything was a nickel. It was so wonderful. Everything was a nickel. The problem is nobody had any nickels. And that's the problem. Nobody's got enough nickels to buy the stuff. So, yeah, when you look at a 2.7% inflation, it's not because prices are stable and the economy's booming. It's because when there's the aggregate demand is shifting way back because people don't have any money. I mean, you can see it. You go to restaurants. How many restaurants have closed in your area? The mid-priced restaurants. And people are shopping at the most discount places. Dollar Tree and all those places are doing very well. The bargain places like TJ Maxx, places are packed. You go to the department stores, if you can find them, they're empty.
That's right.
It's because everybody is shifting their expenditures downward because nobody's got any nickels.
Now, when it comes to you'll own nothing and be happy, 2030, the great taking, is this setting us up for, the implosion of the dollars, we know it, and then they roll to the new system? I have a clip we've played before about the great taking, but this is a new one. I want to play and get your response to this, please, Professor.
For 400 years, securities were personal property. If your account provider, your broker, or your custodian became insolvent, you could take immediate return of your securities. That is no longer the case.
America is in trouble. The Federal Reserve can be summarized in 3 words. It's a scam. I never realized it was the most profoundly corrupt institution in the world, pretending to be honorable.
Mr. Webb came out with his book and people began to read it. Then constituents started calling me and saying, what are you going to do about it? And I didn't realize this and I didn't realize that, and I can lose everything that I own.
So I've written this book, The Great Taking, to put on the table a very sophisticated structure designed to take essentially all financial collateral globally.
In 1994, the UCC, which is the Uniform Commercial Code, changed wording regarding securities. What it meant that the stocks and that you and I purchase can be used as collateral to guarantee loans for that investment firm.
1994 Article 8 revision, they conjured a new type of property ownership or property right called a securities entitlement. That's a contract. So it isn't a security in the sense where you thought you used to own something on paper.
So you own securities, you own, the number that says on your brokerage statement, but securities, are more fungible in that respect.
I just want to regurgitate what I think I'm hearing. So given the fact that these securities are in a pool, they are using the securities in the pool as collateral, but you don't know necessarily if they're using yours or somebody else's.
That's my understanding.
The financial system, the custodians, are empowered to borrow the securities out of the pool without any limit at all.
Taking that the next step, which would mean potentially if your investment firm went bankrupt, your assets could be pledged to that.
The secured creditors have absolute assurance that they will keep the client collateral in the event of insolvency. And this is the shocker, not your insolvency, but insolvency of the people that secretly used your securities as collateral.
That's insane. That's ridiculous. We all own our own property. I pulled out the book and read the section of code he was talking about and said, I'll be damned. I read that the same way he does. So there is a legitimate concern. As individuals, these are our securities. We're not pledging them for any institution, but by God, it's ours.
I'm glad that they're bringing this bill and hopefully we'll make sure that at least the citizens of Tennessee are the highest priority when it comes to their assets being protected. And if anything happens, God forbid it does, that they'll get their assets back.
The derivatives complex, so it gone from 100 to 700 trillion in 5 years. It's now
estimated to be maybe 2 quadrillion.
I didn't even know quadrillion was actually a real word. I thought it was something I made up when I was 7.
They don't need your money. They can create unlimited money. It is about subjugation of people. We're in a hybrid war that is open-ended.
Kissinger said a long time ago, if you want to control people, you control food. If you want to control nations, you control oil. If you want to control the world, you control money.
So if what you're using as a monetary value is not your property, you have none. You have nothing. You are a slave. The average person is doomed. They have to wake up. They have to learn a little bit about what the real world is about. They have to stop buying into the myth.
Wow. And that's just a little trailer.
Yeah.
You know, now, I don't think most people know this. And I noticed this is hearings going on in my state of Tennessee. But here are the elected officials going, wait a minute. You're saying that they can take all of your investments, all of them. So if you have an investment house collapse, they get all your investments with them. They don't move your assets, investments out to another house.
Well, it's called hypothecation, and I mean, if you read carefully, first of all, it applies to publicly traded securities, and people who have a 401k or an IRA or maybe a stock brokerage account, and you want to gamble in the stock market, you buy a stock hoping it goes up, and it's publicly traded, and that's a big problem with publicly traded stocks. This doesn't affect you if you own a gas station and you got the shares in your safe deposit box. That's not the issue. But what you're seeing is that in the big institutions, they aggregate money, and this is primarily 401k money, IRA money. This is managed money, and it has to be big scale money, trillions of dollars. When you're doing that, and you call your stockbroker and you buy 100 shares of AT&T or something, you really don't. They're putting a placeholder in their portfolio and trading it for you. And in a nice world, you get the value, the upside or the downside. And that's, you're basically giving them your cash, and they're playing the stock market for you with their own portfolio. And if that house collapses, you look at, Bear Stearns and some of the big names that are gone. Yeah, that money's gone. You are a creditor to that. It's just like when you go to the bank. You put your money, you walk in there with a suitcase full of $100 bills. Okay, don't do that. But let's say you put the money in the bank and you get your deposit ticket. And you go home and say, oh, good, my money's in the bank. No, it isn't. You gave that money to the bank, and they're doing whatever they want with that money. And when you walk back, you have a legal right to make a withdrawal and get your money back. It's not your dollar bills.
Although sometimes when you go to the bank now, they tell you, we don't want to give you the money. Why do you want the money? Some guy says, because I want to buy precious metals. And they've said, well, we don't think it's in your best interest to buy precious metals. We're not releasing the money. We've had people come on our show and talk about this, that work with those kind of folks.
Well, that's the problem. It's the anti-fraud protections that Elizabeth Warren and all these, kind-hearted souls put in place to protect the little guy. But what it tells you is that the bank has, once you have your money in the bank, there are decisions that can be made for your own best interests. Like, we're not giving you the money to buy gold. They'll give you money to buy a car that depreciates. They'll give you the money to take a vacation, but they won't give you money to buy gold because it's not socially acceptable in the minds of the bank. Banks don't like it when money leaves. They like it when money comes in and stays in and never leaves again. That's what makes banking a successful business. So, unfortunately, from the retail perspective, the customer, the little guy, this was a big problem back in the 1930s with the bank holidays. People think, I'm putting my money in the bank where it's safe. Well, you're not. You're lending the bank money, and whatever they do with it, if the bank goes broke, that's, too bad. You lose. Well, it's much more complicated today because we have the FDIC insuring, and for people like to take cheap shots at the Federal Reserve, and I will still point out that the Federal Reserve is the lender of last resort. So if you go back to the Jimmy Stewart movie, It's a Wonderful Life, many families will be watching that great Christmas movie, or Mary Poppins is my favorite, the big bank run scene. Well, what happens is if there's a bank that gets in trouble and everybody's banging on the glass, they want to get their money out, the Federal Reserve's job as lender of last resort is to pull up to the the back door, shovel money into the bank so Jimmy Stewart can pay it out over the counter, calm everybody down, they all go home, and the bank run is averted. That's a really important function of the Federal Reserve, because we haven't had bank runs in the 1930s. Even that fiasco when I first started in 2023, that big bank in California went broke, and old Prince Harry had his money in there, and old Prince Harry got his money back, didn't he? Way beyond the FDIC limits. But that's a value of having a central bank that keeps the system stabilized. What we're talking about is the monetary policy of inflation and employment and fiddling with the interest rates to stimulate the economy, and the Fed can't keep up with Congress. You can't spend $2.5 trillion a year you don't have, year after year after year. And of course, you get the federal debt ceiling is lifted to $42 trillion under the one big beautiful bill here, one big beautiful law. Well, trust me, they will spend and borrow every last dollar. 2 years from now, they're going to be bumping up against the debt ceiling, and the can will be kicked again. The question that Ray is asking, and others, is what happens when everybody wakes up? It's like musical chairs. They all panic and run for the chairs. Well, you're going to find out there aren't any chairs. They're just going to be running around looking for something. And what's next? And that's when the digital currency thing happens. Because when we remonetize, it's not, they've stopped making pennies, and everybody's kind of laughing about that. But in my mind, that got to be a little scary, because the Treasury makes the coins and the Federal Reserve prints the Federal Reserve notes. But if there's no currency for the average person to use in local trade, and everything is digital, and we're getting there now. I mean, you go to a coffee shop, there's places in town in Milwaukee, so we don't take cash. You got to use a card, whatever. That we're getting to that digital period. And then once this system of money collapses, there'll be something new. I mean, society doesn't stop, but our individual rights will be vastly diminished under any new digital currency system. And this is where we're headed. This is just absolutely where we're headed. Now, keep in mind, the federal government of the United States, I think we're on our 8th or 9th iteration of the American dollar. This thing didn't start in 1776. They had greenbacks back in those days. Continental. Remember the old saying, "It's not worth a continental." Well, you're probably too young to remember that, Brennan. But it meant the continental dollars were worthless. I mean, the Revolutionary War guys would get paid in continental dollars, and they'd sew them into costumes and dance around, making fun of Congress. We've had a long history in America. Americans don't like their Congress. And that's why I argue we should be bringing power back to the states. The federal government should be like the Swiss federal government. They can run the post office, and they can, maintain the military, which they're good at. And maybe, there's 18 enumerated powers for the federal government. They should stick to that and bring the power back to the people, because here we can drive to our state capitol and we can make some noise. The federal government's broke. It's a failed state.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. So, in fact, this is on The New American with Peter Schiff. They had him on. You might find this interesting. Watch this. Here we go. Oh, I got to unmute it. Hang on, it's my fault. Here we go. All right, here we go.
Claim that wages are now rising much faster than inflation, that prices are falling drastically, that 100% of all jobs created since his inauguration, this second time, have been in the private sector, and that companies are coming back to the U.S. in record numbers. And moreover, that he's inaugurating new policies that will reduce drug costs up to 600%. That's kind of a sampling of what he had to say. Care to comment?
Well, look, I don't know if the president is just lying or he's delusional, right? But none of this stuff is true, right? It's all false. Whether Trump believes it himself, it's hard for me to say at this point. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, obviously, prices are not coming down. I mean, you could probably point to some prices that have come down, but on balance, overall, prices have gone up. I mean, even the CPI acknowledges that. So they're clearly not coming down if the CPI is rising by 3% a year. But of course, if the CPI acknowledges that prices are up by 3%, they're probably up by at least 5 or 6% because it understates it by a considerable margin. But I doubt you could find many Americans who would agree with the president that everything is coming down substantially. The president's approval ratings right now on the economy are the lowest they've ever been. They're even lower than they were at any point during his first term. And so why would that be? Right? If things were as great as the president claims, why isn't he getting credit for that?
There you go. Good question, right?
Well, it's an interesting question. I, of course, support President Trump, and he's inherited an absolute economic train wreck. And how do you fix that? I mean, Trump's a brilliant business guy. He's a deal maker, a business guy. You can see from the tariff activities that they're bringing automobile manufacturers from around the world are building plants in the United States. And those plants will be unionized for the most part, and they're going to be paying livable wages. His problem is, and the American system is based on a 4-year term. But when you build a plant, it takes you 4 years to get the plant up and running. It's going to take a long time to shift the economic foundations of the United States to bring manufacturing back. Now, if you look at the One Big Beautiful Law, you'll see that there's some amazing tax benefits built in for manufacturers. If you make stuff in the United States, this is a great tax bill for you because you're not going to pay a lot of taxes. And that's how the federal government incentivizes people to go out and start becoming manufacturers again. Now, the question is, can you find labor in this country that knows how to make anything? And I postulate the answer is no. But the point is, this stuff takes a long time to clean up. So it's, interesting. And keep in mind, the president is not Jesus. The president is not magic wand. The president is just the executive that has to administer a government that was never designed to be an economy. The Soviets had a centralized planned economy, and their government tried that for 70 years until it collapsed. But people look to the United States government, the federal government, as the king. We have never gotten over the psychology that we need a king with a magic wand that can wave the wand that everybody's life becomes beautiful. And if we don't, we're going to elect somebody else. And we've had failure after failure after failure after failure after failure since, well, pick a date. 1945 is a great benchmark. In that period of time, we had Eisenhower that really ran a pretty cool economy at 90% tax rates. And then you had Ronald Reagan, who really changed the paradigm with Don Regan. And what do we have today? So President Trump, first of all, his term was interrupted. And there are some of us in the country who believe illegally. But the point is you got 4 years, and then you had 4 years of absolute train wreck, $11 trillion in additional deficit. Here you go, Don. Here's the key to the White House. Have a nice 4 years. What are you going to do in 4 years? What he's done is very, very impressive when you think about how do you get all these companies in these countries building automobile plants in the U.S. and manufacturing. They're coming here for the tax breaks to avoid the tariffs, and that's the only tool the president has.
And I agree with all that.
And that's why he's done a great job.
But I agree with all of that. I'm just saying,
how do you drain the ocean,
Yeah, I agree with all of what you just said. I'm just saying from a political standpoint, he has to measure expectations. You underpromise, overdeliver. Don't be telling people they don't feel pain. Don't be telling people the economy's great, it's a golden age when they're suffering. Acknowledge what you just said. Explain, I'm working on it. I'm trying to fix it. It's not going to happen overnight. Some of you are really suffering. I'm fighting this Fed. Just talk straight to the American people without being defensive because people aren't agreeing that it's a golden age, that they're not agreeing with him that there's no inflation, because that's not true. There is inflation. I'm just saying he needs to be more understanding of the average American that's struggling right now. He can explain to us the problems he's dealing with as commander-in-chief, or from the chief executive standpoint, actually. He can explain those to us, but he also has to understand the problems of a lot of the other people, many of them who, by the way, are adults, senior adults who are on a fixed income, who are having to go back and become greeters at Walmart.
Well, if you're lucky. I'll tell you, when you look at Franklin Delano Roosevelt back in the day with his fireside chats, he was able, and Roosevelt was very much like President Trump. These guys live very large New York lives. They're very wealthy people, very powerful, very smart. But you pick up the microphone and you're talking to Joe Sixpack in the middle of Iowa somewhere on the radio, and Joe Sixpack's voting for FDR because he's going to save us. Didn't. But that was the sell. The same thing with Ronald Reagan, the great communicator. Ronald Reagan had the ability to talk to people, and they believed him. You look at the Reagan Democrats and how he really tore the labor movement away from the Democrats. He was talking to the people, and people heard. And President Trump has a lot of sympathy. If I look at, I'm in the Midwest, and I look at who are the big Trump supporters, it's the little guy. The big guys, man, they're all waiting for who's going to be the next GOP puppet. The little guys are listening to President Trump, and they believe in him, and they're hoping. And I think, he's got momentum. But keep in mind, he's got a gigantic mess. And when you look at inflation and those inflation numbers, it's a real problem. And people feel that. So it's not an infinite amount of time. And you've got to be able to communicate and convince people that next year is going to be just great. And if it's not, then you're going to see a midterm. And if the Republicans lose the House and they start this impeachment madness again, this is a failed state. This is what failed states look like. And when you look at how the Roman Empire went from being sort of this democracy thing to emperor after Caesar, after Caesar, after Caesar, and the same thing throughout history, if we don't get our Congress under control to be modern and efficient, we've got a real problem. And this is building momentum. And I think, that's why President Trump needs to be talking to the people, and he is. I mean, he made a very important speech about, look, it's going to be better. It's going to be better, but it has to be better. If it's not, this is not going to end well. There's nobody coming up behind him that's as smart about the economy, about business, about finance, about deal making, about negotiations. Nobody tried this amazing thing with the tariffs and using tariffs to bring all these countries around the world to a better position for the U.S. I mean, that was amazing.
And I agree. I thought that was a bold move, and I was kind of for it because I was thinking, well, what else are we going to do? I mean, this is tough challenges require some new innovative ideas, which, of course, I guess that's how we funded a lot before in our past, right? So in closing, do you think the Supreme Court is going to decide in his favor on this?
Well, the court will look to the inherent powers of the executive under the Constitution, and the Constitution does give the president the ability to negotiate with foreign countries, and that's what the tariff is. Legally, he's doing what is allowed, and it has. George Washington did tariffs. This is nothing new. I mean, It's not like Trump came up with this crazy idea. Presidents throughout history have done it, and they say, well, look at the 1930s with the Smoot-Hawley Act, brought in the Great Depression. No, it didn't. The Federal Reserve printing up too much money brought in the Great Depression. But the point is, I think he's doing what he's empowered to do. And that's part of the failed state. If we don't have our candidate in the White House, we're going to make your life absolutely miserable, throw half your friends in jail. And then when we get power back, we're going to rack up, another $11 trillion. At some point, when Obama said we're going to fundamentally change the United States, he was talking about dismantling the superpower. And that's what they're doing. Because we're broke. I mean, if we were, theory, attacked by by China, something big happened, you'd be printing money like air to build things. Inflation would be insane. People would be rooting for the Chinese to win because they just can't live in a collapsing economy, and they know that. I mean, this is how strategy is played globally. So they're not in a good spot. And you know what? You go back to your congressperson and say, why don't you just vote for a balanced budget? They laugh at you. Say, wait, that's naive to think you can have a balanced budget. We can spend all the money we have. I say, yeah, but you got $5 trillion to spend. $5 trillion is a lot of money. And you spend 7.5. Well, it doesn't matter. We're lending it to ourselves. They said, you're not lending it to yourself because every last bond that the federal treasury sells is an asset on somebody's balance sheet. You go buy a savings bond for your grandkid. Well, that's an asset for that grandkid. That's not just fake money.
Yep.
Same thing with the Chinese. They own almost $1 trillion in debt. The Japanese own $1.2 trillion. Boy, if they ever push the sell button, the Federal Reserve is going to be buying quantitative easing. The whole printing press is going to melt down. We're living in a dangerous place because we've become like a drug addict. And if we don't keep getting the drugs, we can't be the superpower anymore. Well, the drug suppliers know that. As long as you can get money, keep it going. But once the money's no good, what do we do?
Yep. What do you do?
You're talking about selling off all the land in the West. It's all the public lands. You sell it all off. That's $157 trillion. Well, that would more than pay the deficit. But, there goes all the federal land.
Mm-hmm. And 2026 is going to be a very interesting year, right?
It is. It is, because the same mechanics are in place. We started fighting this election issue in 2020. And I'm not talking about the tinfoil hat stuff. We're talking about legitimate, serious legal actions. Those started in 2016 with Jill Stein and Hillary Clinton suing on a machine, blah. Well, none of that's fixed. None of that's fixed at all. So why would you go into 2026 thinking these elections are somehow going to be definitive when you never fixed anything? It's all them. It's all the same people running elections. It's all the same equipment. It's all the same stuff. And the only thing that's changed are the names on the ballot, the candidates, but it's the same media consultants. It's all the same campaign advisors. They're talking about in our governor race, they want to spend $50 million on a governor's race in Wisconsin. So I asked the question. I was at a big meeting the other day. I said, who gets the $50 million? Well, it's media, the media. This is where the money goes. So you take $50 million of donors and you blow it on the media, and then somebody gets elected on the same systems, the same clerks, the same machines. Nothing has changed. Nothing. Wow. And it's been, 5 years of litigation? I started this in 2020, So,
ProfessorEastman.com, ProfessorEastman.com, each and every day, Monday through Friday, right here, 11 a.m.
11:30. Be there.
Why do I do that every time? 11:30. Who's at 11 a.m., Logan? Linstead. That's why. 11:30 Central, Monday through Friday. 11:30 Central, Monday through Friday. Maybe if I say it enough, I'll remember. Dan, as always, thank you for being with us, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you and your family. Enjoy the holidays and give thanks. It's a beautiful time of the year.
Indeed. Danny's been checking in, guys. And that's our broadcast for tonight. We'll be back, Lord willing, Monday and Tuesday. And then we're off for about 10 days until January 5th. But we'll break in and come back to the news desk even during that break if we have to, if there is breaking news. WorldviewTube.com here 24/7. We're going to have some special Christmas programming as well for you. So again, we look forward to being back here with you on Monday and Tuesday. But till then, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Roll the music. Let's call it a night. Hey, and don't forget, if you're looking for that quick Christmas gift for somebody, give them the Vault. WorldviewTube.com/Vault. We're selling a lot of Vault memberships. So apparently a lot of you think these are great Christmas gifts as well. Just be sure to check that this is a gift. The little box, check that this is a gift so you can make sure it gets all processed correctly and to your friend or family member. WorldviewTube.com/Vault. Hey, thanks for watching and thank you for your support. Till next time, I'm Brandon House. May God save America. Take care.
This is Brandon House Live. Whether the issue is law, science, economics, history, family, social issues, education, religion, government, or national security, Brannon brings the issues of the day into clear focus through the lens of a Judeo-Christian worldview. And now, here is your host, Brannon House.
And good evening. Welcome to the broadcast. Glad you were with us on this Thursday night, December 18th, 2025. Ooh, I got Christmas cards. Lots of Christmas cards. And this is just a small sampling. Lots of Christmas cards coming in. Let me share a few of these with you real quick. But hey, tonight I'm going to have on a panel, J.B. Hixson. He's the author of this book right here, The Spirit of the Antichrist, The Gathering Cloud of Deception. That's volume 2. He's written a couple books on that, which I guess is why it's volume 2. That would be a couple, right? I think he has one on the false prophet as well. He's going to join us, and we're also going to be joined by Brandon Holthouse. He'll join us out of Bakersfield, California, and we're going to talk about the events of 2025, Bible prophecy, world events, economic, national security, transhumanism, technocracy, where we've been, where we're going, how we should think about it, and how we should respond and prepare, particularly through the lens of a Christian world view. I think a lot of you are going to like this panel. Oh, we got some Christmas cards. Did I mention we got Christmas cards? We got Christmas cards. We have some breaking news tonight. I don't think you guys can show it But the boys in the control room wanted me to see that there was something that Dr. Naomi Wolf put out on her Twitter feed, something that was not on her 2025 bingo card. It's not crude. It's just medical terminology. And it's a doctor by the name, of course, Dr. Oz. What department is he with, guys? That's the Department of Health and Human Services. And he is saying, and of course, we know that Bobby Kennedy has come out and he's stopping a lot of this transition stuff for kids. Thank you, Bobby Kennedy Jr. He's putting a stop to a lot of that transitioning of these kids and these procedures, which I think is absolutely disgusting. But apparently, Dr. Oz weighed in, and the boys said, you see what Dr. Naomi put out, that this was not on her, not a sentence on my bingo 2025 card. Dr. Oz saying that the creation of a male genitalia on an average American, which of course they're doing this on kids, sadly, but it makes you think this was also being paid for perhaps by your tax dollars, because I think they were doing transition on some folks in our prisons, weren't they, guys? And the creation of a male genitalia on average was $150,000. Now, and for a child, it was $150,000 per child. Again, that is sex abuse, I believe. It's perverted, it's perversion. But I did not realize the cost of these things. But Dr. Oz laid it out. But that was $150,000 if you want a quality one. So apparently, you could get cheaper fake body parts if you wanted to pay less. But folks, we've been paying for this. But I do think it is absolutely child abuse. How can you say anything else? So again, we talk about some of the things we're not happy about with the Trump administration, but I got to talk about the things I am happy about. And I'm happy that Dr. Oz and RFK Jr. are bringing out the fact that they're putting an end. They're trying to stop these attacks on children. In fact, I want to bring up the RFK. I had it up here, and then I thought, I won't play it. RFK Jr. On transitions. I want to play it because I think it's important if I'm going to complain about some things that I point out the things I'm happy about. So here he is announcing to ban transgender drugs and surgeries for children. And Dr. Oz got in on this, talking about exactly how expensive it is. Here we go. Here's RFK Jr. Here we go. Oh, I should plug in my computer. There we go.
Today's revenue for sex-rejecting drugs and surgeries in 2023 were estimated in one study to exceed $4.4 billion and on track to exceed $7.8 billion by 2030. One doctor was recorded callously describing sex-rejecting procedures as a big moneymaker. Hospitals rake in millions of dollars by convincing boys and girls that a lifetime of off-label prescriptions for estrogen and testosterone blockers, chest reconstruction surgeries, and more are the only way to achieve true happiness and belonging in life. It's wrong. The Trump administration will not stand by while ideology, misinformation, and propaganda push vulnerable young people into decisions they cannot fully understand and that they can never reverse.
Well, thank you, RFK Jr. Thank you, Trump administration. Like I said, folks, I'm just going to call balls and strikes, and this is awesome. This is a home run. Good job, guys. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Oz, for pointing out how much money they've been spending on this. Even got, like I said, down to the details of what these fake construction of genitalia to have someone, quote, switch their gender actually cost. So good job, guys. All right, let's see here. Oh, here's a nice card. Look at this, guys. Oh, I love it when they send in the family photos. I won't put everybody's family photo up there on the screen, but I love it when they send those. Here's a beautiful Christmas card, Light Out of Darkness. Brandon, Melissa, thank you for your light of insight in the dark world. Melissa, Logan, and the entire team for the